Over 100 Afghan and international organizations, including ISHR, have urged the UN Human Rights Council to establish an independent accountability mechanism for Afghanistan to address ongoing and past crimes under international law. They stress that decades of impunity worsened under Taliban rule through systematic repression of women, girls, minorities, and human rights defenders, demand urgent investigation, evidence collection, and pathways to justice and reparation for victims. The groups called for the mechanism to complement the Special Rapporteur's mandate, support ICC and ICJ efforts, and ensure a survivor-centered approach that ends cycles of violence and impunity. The Tbilisi City Court has frozen the bank accounts of 7 prominent Georgian civil society organizations, including leading human rights groups such as the Civil Society Foundation, Sapari, and the Social Justice Center, amid unfounded criminal investigation for sabotage. Authorities allege these organizations aided protesters by providing equipment, legal support, and financial assistance, with charges that could carry life imprisonment, while denying the groups access to case files. The Observatory for the Protection for Human Rights Defenders condemned this as part of a wider campaign to silence dissent, calling on Georgia to unfreeze the accounts and judicial harassment and repeal repressive laws restricting freedoms of association, expression, and assembly. The Observatory for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders reported the enforced disappearance of René Missode Kofi, known as Avatravi, a Togolese content creator and activist detained since July 2025 for peacefully criticizing government repression. On 22 August, he was taken from Lomé Civil Prison by unidentified individuals after being disciplined for possessing of phone, and his whereabouts remain unknown, raising grave concerns for his safety. The Observatory strongly condemns this act, urging Togo to immediately disclose his fate, release him and other arbitrarily detained activists, criminalize enforced disappearance in national law, and guarantee freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. Mio Aye, leader of the Solidarity Trade Union of Myanmar, her daughter Shu Twel, and other union activists were arbitrarily arrested in late July 2025 after raids on their homes and offices, with their whereabouts and charges still unknown. Rights groups warn that they may be held in notorious interrogation centers where torture is common, and Mio Aye is being denied access to essential medication for her health condition. Over 25 civil society organizations are calling for their immediate release, legal protection, and international pressure to end arbitrary arrest and repression of labor rights defenders in Myanmar. The ICRC has documented over 37,000 missing persons in Syria since the conflict began, though the real number is far higher, leaving countless families in prolonged anguish without answers. Ahead of the International Day of the Disappeared, the ICRC urged sustained collective efforts from authorities, civil societies, and international actors to prevent further disappearances and support families' rights to know their fate of their loved ones. Through psychological support, forensic assistance, and coordination with the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and other stakeholders, the ICRC continues to push for a transparent, family-centered response to this ongoing humanitarian crisis. Since early August, torrential rains and windstorms have devastated Yemen, affecting over 46,500 people, destroying homes and infrastructures, and displacing thousands already living in fragile conditions. The floods have intensified public health risk, with rising cholera cases and limited access to food, shelter, clean water, and medical care, further worsening the impact of years of conflict and poverty. The IOM is providing emergency assistance but warns of severe funding gaps, urging the international community to scale up, support, and invest in climate-resilient infrastructure to prevent further loss of life and displacement. The Human Rights Foundation's latest Financial Freedom Report highlights how authoritarian regimes are increasingly weaponizing financial systems to suppress dissent and minorities. In Russia, a new law lets police freeze citizens' bank accounts without court approval, while Iran has seized the homes and assets of over 20 Baha families as part of systemic religious persecution. The report also tracks global financial restrictions and responses, from Syria's planned currency revaluation and Thailand's new transition caps to proposals by the Bank for International Settlements that could undermine financial privacy vital to activists and dissent. The Human Rights Foundation welcomed the release of Bolivian governor and prisoner of conscience Luis Fernando Camacho, who had been arbitrarily detained for nearly 3 years in Chocoro prison after leading peaceful protests against electoral fraud in 2019. His conditional release to house arrest following international legal pressure and UN ruling declaring his detention unlawful allows him to resume his duties as governor while still facing restrictions. The HRF emphasized that this development brings hope for other political prisoners in Bolivia, including Marco Antonio Pumari and former President Janine Áñez, and marks a step towards restoring democratic governance after years of repression under the MAS party. The Australian Human Rights Commissioner Lauren Finlay has raised serious concerns about proposed amendments to the Immigration Act that would allow the government to remove non-citizens to third countries without granting them procedural fairness. Of course, in Austria. She warned that stripping away the right to be heard undermines fundamental legal protections, risks grave harms, and could even create retrospective criminal liability. Finlay urged Parliament to scrutinize the changes carefully, stressing that migration policy must uphold both the rule of law and Australia's international human rights obligations.